Welcome to the WagerTalk Podcast for the week ending April 7th. We've got a big show tonight as William Bernanke joins us from CG Analytics. He's going to talk to us about the Final Four. Also, we've got another edition of Handicappers Corner with special guest this week, Mark Lawrence. We'll have Ralph Michaels, Dave Cokin in studio with me. We'll break down the Final Four, get our plays, and, of course, at the end of the show, we'll have our best bets. And we also going to open up the show with William Bernanke. But before I bring him on, I want to tell you guys we've got a special offer for you. We appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to the podcast, and we're going to reward you with $10 free. All you got to do is go to the site, enter at checkout, coupon code Final Four. That's final and the number 4, and you'll get $10 off anything you want to purchase. That coupon will be live through Saturday, Final Four action. All right, let's bring in tonight's first guest, and that is William Bernanke. He is the manager at CG Analytics. You can follow William on Twitter at the Moneyline Guy. And Will, Final Four is here. Before we get into it, I want to give you guys a big shout-out. First to the table with NFL season win totals. Guys getting the job done early, putting those numbers up. And, you know, I always like to give guys credit to be the first ones to put anything up because you guys are putting setting the market and exposing yourself to the numbers and see where they are. Did you get any action on those out of the gate? Anybody jumping on anything?
Oh, yeah. Just to put in perspective, 20. Actually, now it's probably got to be higher than this. Over 25 teams, I'd say 26 this morning, have seen some sort of action. So that should give you an indication of how popular these were right out of the gate. And thank, of course, Tony DiTomaso. He was the guy that really got this whole thing, going and saw the whole thing through. So all the credit, I like to give all the credit to him and his team over there at Risk. Great job, and the fact that we have 26 teams this morning that we've seen action on, and we've seen some sharp action. I'm just going to name a couple of teams. I don't have all the stuff in front of me here. Sharp action on Arizona, believe it or not. That was one of the first that was hit. I think it was over 5. They hit that. And we saw some sharp action on some of the more popular teams. Green Bay, the Bears under, and the Giants under. Those are just a couple of teams we saw some sharp action on.
Correct me if I'm wrong. The Patriots were the only team that opened up over 10.5. They opened at 11 and actually got bet down to 10.5.
Yeah, you know what? The New England saw sharp money on both sides. At first the over, and then back on the under. So we're back where we started with a higher juice, 10.5, really high juice. But we've seen some respected money come in on both sides. So that's interesting. We see respected money coming on both sides with Dallas as well, teetering back and forth there.
Well, again, kudos to you guys for being first to the market, and we like that. And you guys always, every year you put up the NFL lines for the entire season. Will you guys be doing that again this season?
I believe we will be, yeah. Just like last year, I think it's great to keep this continuity going, be first with this, and be first with full season lines as well once the schedule comes out.
All right, let's get to what everybody is interested in, and that's Final Four. We're down to the Final Four, but before we look at those teams, let's recap the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 rounds. How did the books fare in the round of the Sweet 16?
We did really well in the Sweet 16. It was a banner day for us as the dogs were barking and biting, as we all know. It was a shift in what was happening early in the tournament. This round of 64 and 32 were favorites somewhat dominated, or somewhat's probably an understatement, but dogs winning outright was tremendous for us.
Any particular games stick out that were either very good or very bad in that round?
Yeah, in the round of 16, Virginia Tech covering versus Duke, which was surprising to me because I had done a short little video 2 days before that game saying how we were getting all Virginia Tech money, where Duke was a liability, and that flipped completely day of game where Duke became the liability. You kind of think that would happen, but not to the extent that it did. So it was all Duke money day of game. Virginia Tech covering was huge, and of course Auburn beating North Carolina outright was our biggest win of all of those on the Sweet 16. And then as far as losses, the one that stood out was Michigan State covering against LSU. That was one we took a pretty bad beating on.
The round of eight, the Elite Eight, how did that go for the books for you?
Oh, did well again, and I'll just get into some of the teams here that helped us out and a couple that hurt us. Auburn again, Texas Tech and Michigan State coming through were tremendous. Texas Tech winning, against Gonzaga, and then Michigan State, of course, against Duke. Auburn winning their Elite Eight game. I'm drawing a blank of who they played. I have it in my mind, but I can't remember.
Kentucky.
And then, of course, the biggest losers for us was actually Virginia, covering against Purdue in overtime.
Well, that was my next question. Was that game? Virginia goes from never covering the entire game to not covering until that last free throw with 1.3 left. Can you give us any perspective on how much money was changed with not only the outright to straight-up winner, but the ATS line changing with those last couple free throws?
Yeah, that was really brutal for us. After doing all the calculations, it was about a little over a six-figure decision for us. So we were doing so well. Maybe the betting lord said, it's your time to take the bad beat. Here it is on a silver platter. Try not to get too crazy, because that was a bad beat for us. But if that's what it takes to lose, you as always, and for bettors too, you tip your cap.
Yeah, every time Ralph talks about that one, Will, he says, Virginia was never covering the entire game. Because I had, full disclosure, I had a big play on Virginia in that one, and I was, I was lucky.
I had Virginia. It's not like I didn't have Virginia, but, people should know that, if you're a 5-point favorite and you were never covering the entire game except in overtime with 1.3 seconds to go, it just needs to be mentioned. It's much different than 4.5. It's much different than had they had a 10-point lead in the half and they were covering and doing well. But, for you and me not to be covering, it's one of those games. We all remember those bad beats. You got to remember these as well.
And that's why they the gods have a way, the gambling gods have a way of balancing the books out, and they gave us one back, and I enjoyed it. Ralph and I, Will, we were in Florida last weekend at the for the Florida Derby. So it was a nice little bonus after a nice day at the track to get that win that we did not deserve. So sorry for you, but we'll take it. We'll take it. Hey, Will, looking ahead now to the Final Four, which game has gotten the most money so far? I'm just talking about handle-wise.
Texas Tech, Michigan State is slightly seeing slightly more handle on that game.
And
yeah, and of the sides, of the four sides you have, sharp action or the majority of monies on the way any of the games have gone?
Yeah, Texas Tech has seen some respected money. We've come down a half a point thus far, and Virginia has seen some sharp action as well. As we bumped them down a little bit, I think it was 5, and then back up to 5.5. So we've seen some liability with them right now. And as far as the totals, the Michigan State Texas Tech under has seen some respected money come in, but we've only dropped it a half a point just because public will come in, and you don't have to drop these numbers as much as you would during the season.
Are any of these four teams a liability from either full season futures or March Madness futures when you guys posted them? Yeah,
the Michigan State's a pretty decent liability right now, just from the sheer volume of tickets we've written throughout this run and during the season. Pretty popular team, but Auburn's right now looks like the worst liability because their numbers were so juicy. And even though the ticket count is less, you're talking about some pretty big numbers adding up and adding up quickly as they progress throughout.
Will, what do you guys got going on this week? Anything at CG?
Yeah, we're still giving away free money right through Monday. Right, through this national championship, $68. The bonus will be added to all new accounts. So let's make sure everybody who's listening to download the app and sign up for an account at either Cosmo, Venetian, Palazzo, Tropicana, the Palms, the M, or the Silverton, because you do need the app if you want to bet like a pro, and time is money. So save time and take the free money.
Well, did you guys post any props yet for those?
I think alternate spreads are up. If not today, tomorrow they'll be up. But no, any player props are not up yet.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good stuff as always, Will. Enjoy the Final Four games, and I'll root for you on everyone that I'm not on.
Sure, those always. I'm sure someone will have a good win and a bad beat. You know how it goes in these games with these tight spreads.
All right, buddy. Enjoy the Final Four. We'll talk to you next week. That is Will Bernanke from CG Analytics. Give him a follow on Twitter at the Moneyline Guy. We're going to step out for a quick break. When we come back, it is Handicappers Corner. We've got a special guest tonight joining Ralph and myself. Mark Lawrence joins us up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast.
It's Manic Monday, and that means every pick at WagerTalk.com is just $9. Get a play in any sport valued at up to $30 for just $9 each and every Monday at WagerTalk.com.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. It's time for Handicappers Corner, and we've got a special treat for you guys tonight. Our guest tonight is Mark Lawrence. He is the owner and publisher of Playbook, one of the best preseason magazines. It's a tool that I use all year long, football season. Ralph, I know you do as well. And the Playbook newsletter, weekly, runs all season long, football and basketball, wealth of information. Let's bring him on. Mark Lawrence joins the show now. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing really great, guys, and I got to say it was really great hooking up with you guys down here in South Florida for the Florida Derby. I haven't seen you in a while. We had a good time, and really looking forward to this March Madness weekend coming up.
Mark, I had to tell people that spending a weekend with Marco is very unique. You have to hear these jokes over and over again. So, hence I had to drink more Miller Lights because of that. But your hospitality was incredible, and you're one of the kindest and warmest hearts in the business, and appreciate everything you did for us when we were down there.
Yeah, I just want to tell our listeners, and, Mark, it was a super weekend, but I got to tell you, you've ruined me for any other racetrack experience after what you did for us on Saturday. I mean, the Flamingo Room, seeing your private suite, and then, guys, when you go to a racetrack, usually the food fare is, you might get, a hot dog, maybe they've got, hamburgers there, get a plate of nachos or something and enjoy the races. Our food menu in the Flamingo Room was filet, sea bass, fresh oysters, mounds of shrimp, Alaskan king crab leg, already split in half, and then lobster tails.
And a sushi bar for those sushi fans.
There was a sushi bar there, too. Desserts, salads, even the salamis and prosciutto and the imported cheese table. You ruined me, Mark. I love you, buddy, but you ruined me for my racetrack experience moving forward.
Yeah, everything's going to be a downer moving forward. What you have to do is reacclimate yourself, Marco, and forget about that weekend and just take in what's around you when you go to the next racetrack they go to. But I'm going to tell you this. You've got some pretty nice racetracks around you, Del Mar being right there, really a fabulous facility. And I don't know if you get to Los Angeles very often at all. Tragedy about what's going on at Santa Anita these days. But, the bottom line is you're a horse racing fan. I am, too. So it really doesn't matter what facility that you're in. All that really counts is the racing itself.
Yeah, Marco went to opening day at Del Mar with Dave Cokin, and he still talks about that. So maybe the women offset the food a little bit when he went to Del Mar opening day.
Oh, I go to Del Mar opening day, and I've been doing it for several years. Once I went there for the first time. If you've never gone to a horse race, go to Del Mar, go on opening day. The finest array of both four-legged and two-legged fillies you will see anywhere in the world. I the first time I went, I texted my buddies. I said, I went into the track, enjoyed the day. There was so much eye candy there. When I came out, I was a diabetic. There was so much eye candy. And it just, it is a very good. Wear sunglasses, Mark, so that you don't get caught with your head. You need to wear blinkers like the horses, so you don't get caught.
I got you 100%. And my only question to you is this: as you talked about the good-looking fillies there, both on the track and off the track. What's the mare situation like? Not as young as you are, Marco. Okay, what are the mares like there at Del Mar these days?
I'll tell you what, the MILFs and the Cougars did just fine, buddy. You enjoy. You got to come out here and do a day at Del Mar. That's for sure. Mark, it is the Final Four. I want to tell our listeners, those that aren't familiar with you, you do the newsletter Playbook. It is one of the best newsletters on the market. You guys have been doing it. How many years now has Playbook, the magazine and newsletter, been in existence?
Well, the magazine, this will be our 27th year for the magazine, and we're into year 34 for the weekly newsletters themselves. So getting up there along the way, we published our first magazine, my goodness, 27 years ago. So looking in the rear view mirror, time has really flown past, only because we're having a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And if you don't know Mark like we know him, this is the only guy in America that hasn't aged a day. This guy, I don't know how you do it. There must be. I know they run the Fountain of Youth stakes at Gulfstream, but you must have actually found that Fountain of Youth, buddy. Can you share some of that with us?
Well, that would be Mom and Dad. I think it's just like horse racing, sires and brood mares. I think it's all in the genes is really what it is. And it probably doesn't hurt the fact that I give up partying. I haven't had a drink or a drug or anything for now over 30 years, so it's probably keeping me on the right track.
All right, it's me. I'm on the wrong side. You're supposed to go. You're supposed to have. Fast women and slow horses is not a good combination.
No, it's not.
All right, let's get into the Final Four, Mark. Let's start with the first game, and you talk about a battle. You've got Texas Tech and Michigan State, two very good defensive ball clubs. You've got probably the best coach of the four that is left with Tom Izzo with Michigan State. How do you see this one setting up?
Well, I think what we're going to see at this stage of the tournament here, Marco, this weekend is experience being a big factor here. And if you think experience matters, Tom Izzo has coached 275 games more than any other coach in the Final Four. That's a huge experience card that he brings to the table in this particular basketball game. I think that's first and foremost what I'm looking at. I love the handicap coaches as much as I handicap the teams, because the teams take on the coach's personality, and we see a lot of Tom Izzo traits each and every year in this NCAA tournament, which are almost always good straight up and against the spread. A lot of good numbers for Tom Izzo coming into this game.
Mark, we do a video out here, and from what you have and from the Ed Meyer database, I mean, some people are familiar with MTI and the database. We have a football version of it on WagerTalk.com, but your database even goes further, has more scenarios on it, and that's what makes Mark such an intriguing handicapper, is because the knowledge and what he can pull out is just incredible. And Mark, you talked about Michigan State, and one of these things that I'm going to pull out from your newsletter is that you know that Tom Izzo, off a straight up an ATS win, is now what, 22-0 straight up?
22-0 straight up, 16-4-2 against the spread when he's favored in this tournament, coming off a straight-up and point spread win. So the momentum seems to carry forward with Tom Izzo's basketball teams. He has their full attention, their full command when they take the floor. He demands a lot of excellent play, and he gets it from his teammates as well.
And speaking of another trend that you had in your newsletter, and this is the kind of stuff that I want to tell our listeners, that you can't get this information anywhere else, and the stuff that you're able to pull from your database. Talking about Texas Tech, you pulled out an angle that teams who beat a number one seed in the Elite Eight round are only 1-12 straight up in 1-11-1 against the spread when they go to the Final Four. Since 1992, if they're riding a 3-game against the spread streak, which is what you're looking at with Texas Tech. So from a historic standpoint, pulling from your database, Texas Tech would be up against it in this matchup.
I believe they would be, exactly. Let me qualify that a little bit deeper, if I may, because Michigan State also beat a number 1 seed in Duke, and Michigan State is also on a 3-game point spread run, just like Texas Tech is. But that stat, that 1-12 straight up and 1-11-1 against the spread stat, is for dogs in this particular round. So that would play against Texas Tech in this particular role. And there's an even better stat, I think, in this week's Playbook basketball newsletter about that pertains to Texas Tech. And basically it involves teams that, well, number one, nobody's ever won this tournament that's lost in the first round of their conference tournament. They bounced out the first round. Nobody has ever gone on to cut down the nets in the NCAA tournament. So knowing that, I went into the database and I looked at teams that lost the first round of their tournament, and anybody that managed to make it to the Final Four round. There have been 10 of those basketball teams. Those teams are 1-9 straight up and against the spread, 0-9 the last 9. So basically, that works against teams that showed a vulnerability, if you will, in that first round game. They didn't step up and play like they were supposed to, and it oftentimes cracks down with them in the Final Four round.
I'm just going to jump into one more thing and promote Mark's newsletter. I mean, if you go to playbook.com, we're going to talk about the magazine, which is an incredible magazine. You can get the digital download or the print version. And the Playbook football newsletter, I believe, Mark, is $119 for the year. Well worth every penny of that. You get it weekly. The preseason issue is incredible, but the Did You Knows and the page 2 stories that he writes. You're hearing great numbers and great statistics, but he also takes you through the process where it helps you handicap throughout the season. The scenarios that he comes up with, weeks 1 through 4, or teams off a loss, or teams off their first loss, or, you're the one that taught me, Mark, that people used to talk about homecoming being a positive, where in reality it's a negative because you're so distracted. So not only does the Playbook give you great information and great plays, it makes you a much better handicapper because someone like Mark with 40 years of experience and the database to go with it teaches you nuances and things to look for and things to try to fade or play on, which again is the biggest selling point to the newsletter.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Ralph. From this standpoint, and is that people will oftentimes diss handicappers that live technically, and I do. I live out of my database, and a lot of what I do is from a technical aspect, and some people think it's data mining. And to a degree it is, but, the bottom line is to be a well-rounded handicapper, you have to do everything. You have to handicap fundamentally, which I know Marco does a lot of that statistically and technically, so you have to be well-rounded and do all three of those things. In the newsletter pertaining to this basketball game here in Michigan State and Texas Tech, we had pointed out in our NCAA tournament guide, there was a thing that we called the elite 8 elements that teams need to possess to cut down the nets. And if you take a look at, we list those in the magazine. Again, we recap them. 17 of the last 18 years, teams that have had each of these 8 elements that are at work here have won the NCAA tournament 17 of the last 18 years. Only one team on the card going into the Final Four qualifies, and that one team happens to be Michigan State.
Good stuff there. And, Mark, before we go to the second game, tell our listeners about the Playbook magazine. That'll be coming out. When does that get released? I know this is the crunch time for you guys. As soon as they cut down the nets, you guys go hard to work finishing the magazine for the next month and a half and get it out on the newsstands in early summer. But tell us the schedule and how they can get that.
Well, we're at work at it right now, Marco, and the magazine is going to go to the printer Memorial Weekend. It'll be on sale at newsstands nationally Tuesday, June 25th. anybody's interested in getting a copy of the magazine before it goes on sale at newsstands, you can get it a week earlier than that. All you need to do is log on at playbook.com, subscribe to the magazine today, and you'll have it in advance of everybody else. But we're working on it right now. We're going through the college football team prospectuses right now. The NFL draft is right around the corner. We'll be buttoning all that up, and we get a lot of good help and assistance. I got to say this, too, from Ralph. He does a terrific job helping us out when we're sifting through players and looking for some key personnel and so forth and whatnot. Ralph does a terrific job helping us that way as well.
And, I mean, remarkably, it's just still $12 for the digital version. They email it to you. You have it on your desktop to use I mean, I use mine in December. I still look back, look at scenarios, look team versus team matchups, historically how teams have done. The articles are great. You know, we just had Will Bernanke on from CG, and they just released their win totals a few days ago. So I know when you talk about your team write-ups, you encompass the team win totals as well, so people will just have another tool to look at when they're betting who their favorite teams are over or under win totals, correct?
Correct. We like to gauge how the teams are doing throughout the course of the season based upon what the expectations were at the beginning of the season. So you can see whether teams are overachieving, underachieving, and where they are at certain stages of the season by posting those season win totals on each team. And
most importantly, Mark showed Marco and I the cover, and it does involve the Cleveland Browns this year, so it's finally fun to have some excitement as a Browns fan.
You know, there was no Pittsburgh Steelers sighting anywhere on the cover. It was a little bit strange, but we had to go all Cleveland Browns this year. Sorry about that, Marco.
You know what? You guys have your fun. You know, and this will be about the 100th time.
He's going to tell the joke again, Mark. Again. I told you. It's rehashing the jokes.
You know, Mark, I told Ralph all the time. I tell Brian Leonard all the time, you're another Cleveland guy. The best thing about Cleveland is you're only a 2-hour drive away from seeing 6 Super Bowl trophies, buddy.
Ooh, that hurts.
Hey, Mark.
But it's true.
Full disclosure, for me, I'm old school. I don't, the digital downloads, I like to have that physical copy. I go down to the Gambler's Bookstore here in Vegas, and I get my copy. I have it sitting on my desk all football season because as a situational guy, I tell you what I really like. The way you have the last 10 years, you have the schedules laid out. You can look at the past performances. And a lot of people say, well, what happened in the past? What's that mean? We're working about right now. But when I'm looking at a revenge situation with a team, I want to have a quick reference and go back and be able to see when they played last year, was there any circumstances? Was one team coming off a big game the week before when they played, and that's why maybe they had the bad performance? And to be able to open up your magazine and look through it real quick, go to that team and see those schedules and see that kind of stuff, it speeds up my process. I love it. And that's also the reason why I'm always busting your stones about you never age, because I got to look at, that smiling face of yours at the corner of the top of that playbook. It's sitting on my desk all year long, buddy.
There you go.
You're watching me work all the time.
You weren't complaining about that.
Do yourself a favor,
smiling.
Marco. I'm old school like you, and I have to have printed copies. I know the digital is nice for the younger crowd. Put it in your phone, put it on your iPad, take it with you, and do all those things. But I love to have it in my hands, and obviously I have copies in my desk. I have a copy even in my bathroom. Just so I'm never too far away from it.
Yeah.
Marco says he's tired of looking at your face. When we were going up the elevator at Gulfstream to the Flamingo Room, he was more excited to see your face than I've ever seen before in my life.
All right, let's go to the last one. Auburn, Virginia. Mark, 3 of these teams, great defensive teams. Auburn's the outlier. They're the team that is here. They're not the defensive dynamo that the other 3 are. They get it done on offense. And you know what? You look at their road to the Final Four. I mean, you talk about going through a who's who of college basketball. You go through and you knock off Kansas. Granted, they weren't the team that they've been in the past, but they knock off Kansas. They knock off North Carolina. Then they knock off Kentucky. The only team missing from the preseason top 5, every year in and year out, is Duke on the run to the Final Four. That's a pretty impressive resume for Auburn. But does Cinderella, does the clock strike midnight for them?
I sort of think it does this weekend, Marco. And tip of the hat to Bruce Pearl. Great job that he's done. As you mentioned, they beat all those blue bloods getting here. And, in fact, if you add up the seed numbers of all the teams that they've played and defeated so far, they total 19. Virginia's opponents' seed totals 40. That just shows you the strength of schedule that Auburn's had to get through to get here. But I have to wonder whether or not at some point that ends up hurting the basketball team rather than helping it. Another side of this game that kind of gets me to the Virginia side is that that theory about rallying around a team who loses a star player in that first game that he's out. Everybody steps up their game to the next level, and they go on and win their next game. But the game after that is oftentimes a different story, and that could end up, I think, being the case with Auburn here. You couple that with this big chip that Virginia has in their shoulder from that disgraceful loss that they had in the first round last year. I'm going to be riding with the Cavaliers in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. This is a spot, the injured player theory at its best here. And as I did a video with Ralph this week, the other fact of that is, Kentucky didn't exactly know what they were going to see from Auburn with the injury, and they only had, that quick one-day turnaround. You had 1 day to prepare a game plan. Now Virginia's had the luxury of looking at that game plan and see the adjustments of what Auburn did without Okeke, and now they have a whole week to prepare their game plan to slow down this Auburn offense. I agree with you. Virginia was my team back in January to cut down the nets. I'm still riding with them. If we get that Virginia-Michigan State final, that's going to be a fun matchup with those two defenses going at it, and have Izzo there and Bennett. We talked about pedigree with horses. Bennett for Virginia's got a lot of pedigree, obviously with his sire in college basketball. So I'm looking forward to it. Strength against strength, offense versus defense. Defense always travels, and if Auburn comes out, playing in this game, and we always talk about the sight lines being different when you get to these Final Four games. You're actually playing in a football stadium, a little bit bigger depth perception and everything, the crowd. If Auburn comes out a little bit slow against this Virginia defense, they might be battling uphill the entire game. And we know at the end of the game, Virginia's got one of the best end games. They hit their foul shots and can extend leads, as we saw in that Purdue game on Saturday night with the miracle cover in overtime that we got. That was just the cap, the icing on the cake for me is a perfect day Saturday. Well, I can't say perfect. I didn't have maximum security like somebody on this call did, so congrats to you. But I'm still looking at the race before that when I lost that head bob with the big 9-1 shot on top.
That was a tough loss.
Yeah, that would have made my trip for sure.
Well, I think you bring out a great point with Virginia having extra prep time to get ready for Auburn in this basketball game. It's not like Auburn's going to catch them by surprise with nothing to prepare for, no game film on them. So I think that's a great point, handicapping this game. And keep this stat in mind, guys, that if Auburn somehow pulls the rug out on Virginia in this game and they end up playing by chance Michigan State in the championship game, look at Tom Izzo and his record against the SEC in the Southeast SEC teams in the big dance here. He's 8-0 straight up and 7-1 to the number all time is Izzo against that conference.
Good stuff as always, Mark. Ralph, you got something else?
Yeah, again, you guys do yourself a favor. Head over to playbook.com. We talked about the preview, the digital guide. Mark's weekly playbook newsletter, it's on sale for $119 there. And, let me give a shout-out to Victor King. I mean, you think you know something about handicapping NFL totals. Well, you read Victor King's totals tip sheet, and he's going to put things in perspective that you've never even thought about. And he does an incredible job doing that totals tip sheet, and so many different products that just can make you a better handicapper, available at playbook.com.
Well, Ralph, I appreciate that. Victor does a great job. He's a totals guru. There's no question about that. And just one quick thought here, guys, before we wrap this up here. I mentioned about pre-ordering the Playbook Football Preview Guide magazine early in advance. And anybody that does that, I'm also going to give you a free month, 30 days of our coffee club. And when I send that out, it's an email I send out every morning to all of our subscribers. And what it basically is my quick overview on what's going on in the card each day. So you get a nice little way to have a cup of coffee with me every morning. That coffee cup will be free when you order your Playbook magazine.
Yeah, and if you really want to enjoy things, you should see how he does things on Saturdays. Very nice, that luxury suite that you guys have at Gulfstream Park, Mark. Hey, remember, next trip you're into Vegas, plan a day to come in and do videos with us, and then we'll go to Joe's Prime Seafood and Steak, have some crab legs and everything at here in Vegas. I know you guys have the original down in Miami. It's tough to get in there, the original in Miami. We can get reservations and have a nice dinner with you. It's on us when you come, buddy.
Hey, I'll look forward to that, Marco. I'll look forward to visiting with you guys and sitting in and do a video with you guys when I get to Vegas in August for that Westgate Superbook seminar.
All right, good stuff as always from our good friend Mark Lawrence. You can follow him on Twitter at Mark Lawrence, and be sure to check out playbook.com for a wealth of information. Guys, we're going to step out for a quick break. When we come back, Ralph, myself, and Dave Cokin, we're going to break down the Final Four again for you, and then we'll have best bets up at the end of the show.
Every Tuesday, WagerTalk.com offers a best bet selection from its hottest handicapper. It's a great way to introduce yourself to WagerTalk.com with a big best bet winner for just $2 on $2 Tuesday.
Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. This segment is brought to you by uwager.eu. Get a 50% sign-up bonus using promo code WT50 when signing up. This is offer exclusive to our WagerTalk listeners. Guys, it is the Final Four. Just 3 games left on the college basketball season. Well, 3 meaningful games. We have the NIT. We're taping on Thursday. NIT will be tonight. And whatever the other one is,
CIT tonight and the CBI tomorrow.
The CBI
tomorrow.
Yeah.
The best of 3 winds up tomorrow in the CBI.
Yeah, and each of the last 6 have gone all 3 games. No one's even over the last 7. No one swept the first 2.
You don't want an event that good to end quickly.
Yeah, hey, it's good for DePaul at least.
Yeah. The one stat just to throw out there for guys for the CBI tomorrow, home team has held court, not against the spread last night, but straight up. Ralph, we talked about that the other day. What's it now, 11-0 the last 3+ seasons?
Yeah, 11-0 straight up. And last night's game, he missed a free throw shot. He did the non-Virginia. He went to the line up 3. I was laying 4.5. There were some 5, so it was for the winner push, and he clanked the last one. So 7-2-1 for the home team now in the CBI.
All right, but let's get to what everybody is interested in, and that is, of course, the Final Four on Saturday. 4 good teams here. You've got 3 common denominator defense. You look at the 3 teams, Texas Tech, Michigan State, and Virginia, clearly all strong defensive teams. And then you have Auburn, the team that likes to go up and down the floor and is the offensive team minus a player. We'll get to that one in a moment, but let's start with Texas Tech and Michigan State, looking at a number of 2.5, total of 132.5. I'll start with you, Ralph, on this one. Michigan State, you got to say, of the teams that are left, they're the most experienced team as far as the last, several years. This is the team that Tom Izzo gets them prepared every year. They make deep runs. Had a classic game against Duke to get to the Final Four. Do they continue? Will they be going to the Monday night game? Or does Texas Tech get the job done and, pull the mild upset?
Well, since you brought up Izzo and, people are going to talk about first-time Final Four coaches, coaching virgins in the Final Four are now 9-3-1 against the spread. So don't give Izzo too much credit. Dave and I talked on the radio just before here on the Las Vegas Sports Line. Chris Beard, isn't really going to get out-coached. He took him there last year to the Elite 8 or Sweet 16. I don't know how far he got last year. And then this year getting him back now, and he's an experienced coach. But I look at it, and flat out, I like the under. It's probably my only play of the weekend of the 4 games. And I think the line is probably 4, 5, or 6 points too high from what I made the line. I think both teams play defense. I think when you get to this Final Four, you have the same situation as you did in the NIT. The NIT quarterfinals now are 16-2 to the under the last 9 years. Teams get to Madison Square Garden, different sight lines, different backdrops. Now you have played neutral settings, but you haven't played in a football stadium. So now you have expansive sight lines and you have curtains put up to try to draw some of that. And it's just a different setting, and there's added pressure to it. We know defenses are elite. Texas Tech won. And the thing to mention about Texas Tech is sometimes 1 isn't quantifiable. 2 to 3, you know what the difference is. 3 to 4, you know what the difference is. Sometimes you could be 1 and so good at 1, you should be like a -3 or 4. You could be a couple slots better than the 2. And you watch Texas Tech play defense, what they did in this tournament to Buffalo, to Gonzaga. I mean, they have been the most impressive defense there is.
No, I can't disagree with anything Ralph just said. And, let's face it, I don't think either team really wants to get up into a up and down the court type of game because it's not their game. Michigan State did an exceptionally good job of not getting exposed to one of their liabilities in the last game, which is turnovers. They have been a team that has at times been very liable to turnovers this year. But they took great care of the ball last game, and part of that was that they were careful and patient on offense. And I can't imagine that they're going to be anything different here. We know Texas Tech plays that style. So even though they put a total up here that, kind of makes you sketchy about playing under because it's not a real high total, I think that's the way the game's going to flow. So I would agree with Ralph and suggest the under in Texas Tech, Michigan State.
I'll be honest, guys, when they brought the numbers out, all of us as handicappers, we put our own number in our head, what we think the game is going to be. For the sides and the totals of the games, the only one that struck me as odd is I thought that this total came out high on Michigan State, Texas Tech. You have 2 teams that want to play the same style, and they play good defense. Then you look at the other game with Virginia and Auburn, you've got one that is going to play slow and the other one wants to play fast, and yet these 2 over-unders are around the same number, and that surprised me. I thought that Michigan State, Texas Tech would definitely have been the lower of the 2 because both styles are the same, and you've got 2 good defensive teams. So it caught me by surprise. So initial reaction, I agree. I think there's value on the under.
And one other thing real quickly is that I don't think either one of these teams is going to give up a lot of second-chance baskets. And, that's something that pushes games over the total, is teams that are able to offensive rebound and get points out of what should have been empty possessions. I just don't think you're going to get a lot of second chances in this game. And with that in mind, unless the teams have really good shooting performances, I think it's got to be a low-scoring game.
Marco, one thing to mention about that total and why this total is closer to that Virginia game. I mean, Virginia's number 1 in scoring defense, not because they have the best defense, but they're number 353 in tempo. They are the absolute slowest team. Texas Tech and Michigan State are both in the 200s, the low 200s. So they're not like Oregon or some of those teams that were in the South. There were like 6 of the slowest 8 teams out of the bottom 20 teams in there. So yes, they have elite defenses, but we saw a run with Texas Tech scoring in the 80s, at the end of the regular season. I don't think when we get here we'll do that. One thing I do want to mention is that I do like the matchup with Michigan State, because you have an elite point guard in Cassius Winston who shoots 42% from three-point land, and you also have Matt McQuaid who shoots over 40% from three-point land. So Texas Tech hasn't been stretched with good three-point shooters. Not that Michigan State's a good three-point shooting team, but they do have 2 guys that can get hot from three-point. If those guys get hot and stretch the Texas Tech defense, I think that's what you got to look for. And also mentioning, not that this is a way to pick a game, but each of the last 12 national champions, with the exception of UConn twice, has been a Ken Palm top 15 offense and top 15 defense. Those 2 teams would be Michigan and Virginia.
All right, Michigan State.
Michigan State and Virginia, excuse me.
I agree with you. And me looking at this game, 2 things I'm going to point out. With 2 good defenses, I want a good point guard. And as you said, Winston, to me, is the best. He's going to be the best guy on the floor, and he's going to be able, I think, to find opportunities and to create the offense whenever you are working hard for a bucket, because both teams are going to work hard on the offensive end. Dave, you talked about the turnovers with Michigan State, and that was a problem with them most of the season, and it was a big problem in the Minnesota game. They still won by 20, but they had 22 turnovers in that game.
They'd have won that game by 40 if they hadn't been turning the ball over.
Absolutely. But if you look in the last 5 games, that's the only game that they had the problem with the turnovers. Is in the other 4 games, they've had single-digit turnovers, 9 twice and 7 twice. So they have definitely taken care of the basketball.
Part of that, though, is that they're not – in the Minnesota game, they could run up and down the floor. They did whatever they wanted to. And they were a little sloppy. But in the other games, they've been a lot more protective in terms of ball security. That also slows things down.
Absolutely. And, you look at Michigan State and you talk about, you want the hot teams. There really wasn't a hotter team than Michigan State down the stretch. This is a team that went 14-1 straight up to finish the season.
This is Izzo 101. I mean, this is what he's done over the years.
Played tough schedule at the beginning and peak at the end. I agree with you, Dave. And, Dave, that one loss, you know how I always like to look at situational stuff. The lone loss in the last 15 games was at Indiana, the game immediately after the first meeting against their arch rival, Michigan. And so if there was a natural...
Michigan on the road, pulling the upset,
Right. So if there was ever, a spot for a letdown, Indiana was ripe to pull that upset in that spot. So, you got to look at this one. But, guys, I'm going to say to you, in a game that could go down to the last bucket...
Or go to overtime.
We're sitting at a 2.5. Now, in this round, and as good as these teams are... The question for me, I generally don't go money line. I always do the point spread. But if I can't get back to 2, I think I might be leaning more to the money line, lay that little bit of extra juice, and just have the situation of have to win the ball game. What do you think?
Put a bet in for me with your money, because I'm not going to be playing the side in this game in all likelihood. If I do anything with this game, it's probably going to be on the total.
Yeah, and I'm going to split my totals bet first half and second half, just to not get burned by, you are going to lay a premium. It's going to be a couple points lower in the first half, but just in case it's not a 4 or 5 point game and someone starts to foul early, where with a couple minutes left they say let's not run 30 seconds off this clock on each possession and foul early. So I will be splitting my bet first half under and full game under.
All right, let's move to the second one. It's Auburn and it's Virginia. Guys, if you look at this Auburn team and you look at their road to the Final Four, I mean, the only thing that's missing on this resume is Duke, because they just went through all the blue bloods of college basketball when you beat they rolled through Kansas, North Carolina, and Kentucky. Now, granted, Kansas, we know that this was a bad situation for them coming in here, having to play the freshmen. But name-wise, you can't get a better resume of your 3 wins, coming into this game. But you know what? They're going to be facing a Virginia team that, yes, they got lucky. Let's talk about it. I said to you, Ralph, probably at worst, the second best pass of all time might have been the best pass, and you made a good point of why you deemed it as the best pass of all time. I said, I went to the Christian Laettner pass when they beat Kentucky. And you said, well, at least they were coming out of a timeout.
Christian Laettner had a play. All he would do is making a play.
Yeah.
This guy had to have the sense of timing and space to make that pass and throw it away. So.
And the guy to catch and release on the other. I mean, you talk about a perfect play, and they win it in overtime. Dave, I've said it time and time again. When a team wins a game ugly, that has, to me, I like riding a team that wins ugly, because to me, it's like it just puts them in a different mindset. They believe they can do anything because they just won a game that they never should have won.
But you don't think Auburn, I mean, I know Auburn won in a different fashion, but how can they not be as confident as anybody right now? I mean, they're just riding so high. They get the big injury, and it was a big injury. I mean, he's not their leading scorer, but he's an inside guy like Okiki against a team that they had gotten murdered by in the paint in both regular season meetings, because they made a big comeback in the first game with Kentucky, but they were getting slaughtered in that game. In the second game, they could have lost by 50.
The Stuckey game was out without P.J. Washington.
Right.
The second one, yeah.
Yep. And then they go in last week, and they've got a real liability going into that game. And they ended up beating Kentucky at their own game, and they win the game. So I don't, I don't think the momentum, I think it's just dead even. I think at this point, any team that's in the Final Four, they all have the same amount of momentum, and they all have the same amount of motivation. Now, the one thing here is, can Auburn come up with another great game while missing one of their best players? Well, Ralph talked about this during the radio show, so I don't want to steal his thunder. But the guy that's stepping into that spot in the lineup, it's not like he's an inexperienced guy, and he's very capable of going out there and putting up some of the same numbers that the kid who got hurt put up. So to me, maybe I penalized Auburn too much in terms of the way I assessed them against Kentucky. I'm not going to make the same mistake here. I think the line's right where it ought to be in this game. I think Virginia's rightfully the favorite, but boy, I don't want to lay that kind of points against an Auburn team that is on top of the world right now.
Marco, we're talking about Daniel Purifoy, and I'm going to save that for my best bet as far. But, Purifoy has been on this team for 4 years. He was academically ineligible the first year, but practiced. Second year, started 27 games, 12 points, 5 rebounds a game. He's 6'7". He plays center or big forward.
Good athlete.
So the same thing. Last year, he had to sit out because of the FBI probe, and he had to sit out the first 9 games for this year for the FBI probe, and just hasn't worked himself into the lineup. Well, Auburn had 11 guys that was averaging 10 minutes. It's tough to work yourself into that lineup. Hadn't played over 20 minutes in any game this year until the last game against Kentucky. He played 32 minutes, and he was back in the lineup. So you have a player who's been with the team for 4 years, was able to practice, has been part of this program. It's not like you have a young kid who's stepping into the spot. Now, a couple numbers here. Virginia, of course, one of the best road teams there is. 18-2 straight up away from home and 15-5 against the spread. They were also 9-0 against the spread away from home when laying under 6 points in this role. And, people talk about Virginia. Yeah, they lost to Maryland, Baltimore County. And, yeah, they just got by this year, But they pretty much have been the Ken Palm 1 or 2 team the entire season. This is one of the elite teams in the league that still doesn't get the credit because of what happened. Then I looked at Auburn, and granted, you're taking the slowest paced team, which has the lowest scoring offense, and I'm putting some number on Auburn, which is just giving me the best ATS record. So this is sort of connived. But when I went back and looked at Auburn, when they're scoring 71 points or less in a game, they're 2-15 ATS. So they have not won those lower scoring games. They're used to their pace. They're used to higher scoring games. And so I look at it, but then I also brought up Virginia's point. In their last 2 games, they've played 85 minutes. Only 6 minutes of those 85. And when you have 85 minutes, that means you have 420 player minutes because there's 5 teams. Only 6 of those 420 minutes were used by a player not in the top 6 of the rotation. That's it. Auburn uses 6 guys, period.
Virginia.
Excuse me. Thank you. Virginia uses 6 guys. That's it. If Virginia gets in any early foul trouble with this hectic Auburn offense and the hectic pace and chasing guys down, and, if Auburn can move the ball and get some rebounds and press the pace, and you got some guys making silly fouls, I will certainly live bet Auburn in this game because you have Virginia playing guys in the second half that haven't played. You have a different rotation. You have inexperienced guys that are going to feel the pressure.
Play devil's advocate for a little bit with some of the things you brought up. All good points. One, fatigue won't be an issue as far as with all the minutes that they logged and had that overtime because you've got you had a week to prepare.
Just worried about foul trouble. Yes.
The going to the Auburn and with the player that you're talking about, and we talked about this when we did the video. This qualifies to me as the injured player theory, where you had the injury that first game, the team, rose to the occasion. And I also pointed out that because it was the quick turnaround, you went from Friday to Sunday. Granted, Auburn didn't, have time to prepare either, but Kentucky didn't know what Auburn was going to do with the Okeke out. Now Virginia's got to look at the game film and work for a week on a game plan to see, okay, this is what Auburn did. They brought that guy in. He played to significant minutes. They're going to be prepared for that. I think that gives Virginia a better advantage than Kentucky had going from Friday to Sunday. The other point I'm going to make with Virginia, and Dave, you remember way back when. I mean, I've been on Virginia bandwagon from the start. We did a radio show, I think we were back in January, maybe early February, and said, what's your top five right now? We know what the rankings are. What's your top five? And I said, Virginia's my number one team. And I've stuck with it. I think that this is a team people are going to look at and say, hey, they were lucky to beat Purdue. Yeah, they were. But you know what? They're still here. And the one thing about that Purdue game is there's no Carson Edwards on the court for Auburn in this one. Carson Edwards had a game of the ages against Virginia. And the reason I mean, a lot of guys go off for 40 points. He had 42 points in that game. But we're talking about one of the best defenses in the country. This kid single-handedly kept Purdue in that game. He scored 42. The rest of the team scored 33 combined. I just think Virginia, and the one other thing, if Virginia's up 3-4 points late in the game, so many times you see these guys go to the line missing foul shots. Virginia doesn't do that. They're one of the better foul shooting teams in the country where they can extend the lead late whenever they're getting fouled. I think, it's been a nice run for Auburn. I think it ends. The fact that Auburn was the surprise, team to win their conference tournament, then to face Kentucky and beat, the big gun of their conference to get to the Final Four. I know it's the Final Four. Nobody's not, you're not looking past anybody, anything that, but they've been running on adrenaline for a while. I think it's Virginia's here. They're in the Final Four. They got to where they needed to get that monkey off their back, and they only got one thing left to do. If they cut down the nets, everybody's going to forget that they're I don't know that they'll forget, but that old race being the team that lost to a 16 seed, the only team in history.
If you take any team in college basketball and you say, I'm going to give you 2-year span and you're going to lose to a 16 seed in the first year and you're going to win the national championship in the second, there's going to be 99.9% of the teams in the country that say, I'll take that.
They'll take that. All right. Good stuff. And you guys, anything on the total in this one?
Not for me.
No, I just think, I think Virginia does control tempo, but again, Auburn's going to push the pace when they can. So I think the number's right, and it's tough to, who controls the tempo. I think you're going to have a correlated parlay probably. If you like Virginia, you like the under. If you like Auburn, you like the over.
Sounds good to me, guys. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, it's Best Bet time. We'll see what the guys have lined up for you. Best Bets up next here on the WagerTalk Podcast. Welcome back to the WagerTalk Podcast. Before we jump into this week's Best Bets, I've got a special offer for all of our listeners. Hey, we appreciate you taking the time to listen to our podcast, and we're going to reward you with $10. You can use that $10 any way you like. This coupon will be good through Saturday, so be sure to use it. And the coupon code is FINAL4. That's FINAL and the number 4. Put that in, enter it, checkout in the coupon code section. You will get $10 off any purchase. And, guys, let's head into the best bets. I'll start with you, Dave. Where are you going to go for your best bet?
Well, I don't know if it's really a best bet, but I don't have much else at this point because I don't do baseball until the day of the game. And the hockey, I'm done until the Stanley Cup playoffs, which start next week. So that leaves me the total in the Michigan State-Texas game, Texas Tech, I should say. And I don't even know if it'll make my card. So I wouldn't go wild tailing me on this one. But I do think what I said has a good chance to hold up. And if the game stays in regulation, I expect Michigan State and Texas Tech to stay under the total.
Ralph, your best bet?
We talked about it. It's Auburn's Daniel Purifoy. The number at the Superbook was 5.5. The juice was -10 either way, laying the 5.5. And, as I mentioned, a person that's had to work his way back in the lineup. You have the Okeke injury. He hadn't played over 20 minutes in any game this season up until the Kentucky game when he played 32 minutes. He only had 6 points in that Kentucky game, but again, now he's more comfortable. Now he's been practicing in the offense. Now he's more accustomed to the offense again. This is clearly my best bet for the weekend from any side, any total, any prop.
All right, I'm going to go to a baseball game for Friday night. I've been picking on my Pittsburgh Pirates. They've blown 2 games in a row with that bullpen, and I'm going to go against them again on Friday night. They're going to be playing host to the Cincinnati Reds. Cincinnati will be sending Sonny Gray to the mound on Friday night. Now, Sonny Gray pitched the opener for Cincinnati, and he got shellacked by his first start, I should say. He got pounded by the Pirates. He only went 2 2/3 innings, gave up 5 hits. Control, a big issue in that first game for Sonny Gray, gave up 4 walks. But I look for him to bounce back, and I'll tell you what, I look for Sonny Gray to have a good year. Sonny Gray, not a guy that did well last year signing with the Yankees. This is one of those guys that, you know, he's better off in a small market. We saw how good he was his career in Oakland, and I think Cincinnati is a great spot for him. That first game, you know, maybe a little bit of jitters, first start for the new team, pitching at home. But now he's on the road, not going to have that pressure, and I look for him to bounce back. I like to take veteran pitchers off a bad outing. You generally get a strong performance from them. And the Pirates right now, their mindset with the way they've blown these games can't be good. I'll take what I feel is a live dog on Friday night, getting back plus money on the Cincinnati Reds with Sonny Gray. That is my best bet for this week. I want to thank all of our guests on tonight's show. William Bernanke for joining us from CG Analytics. Our good friend Mark Lawrence from Playbook.com. Big thanks to Ralph Michaels and Dave Cokin for joining me in studio. Behind the controls, Mark Seidel makes sure we sound good. Big shout out to Johnny Detroit. Him and the crew make sure this podcast is up and available all over the place. You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. You can listen on Spotify, Google Play, and iHeartRadio. And last but not least, to you, our loyal listeners. We truly appreciate you taking the time to tune in each week to listen to us. I'm Marco D'Angelo. Until next week, let's cash some tickets.